Hey everyone, I'm Allison Morris. You are watching NBC News Now. COVID relief front and center this hour, both on Capitol Hill and over at the FDA. We are waiting on FDA approval of a second COVID vaccine. Once that comes, healthcare workers could start getting those Moderna shots on Monday.
All of this is sort of bittersweet because at the same time as we're moving ahead with what will ultimately be the answer and the final solution to this, we're living through very, very difficult times.
The pandemic in the U.S. is worse than it's ever been. 230,000 people coming down with COVID Thursday. The virus killing more than 3,300 Americans. Meanwhile, lawmakers still scrambling to get a $900 billion COVID relief bill and a funding bill passed to avoid a government shutdown. We're going to start in Philadelphia tonight. NBC News Now correspondent Maura Barrett is at Penn Medicine. It's the site of some of Moderna's clinical trials. Maura, thousands of people have already gotten the Moderna shots as part of these trials. Would you walk us through them? How did they work? What were they like?
Right, so 30,000 people across the country participated in the Moderna trial, several of them all here in Philadelphia, a big chunk of that trial being conducted here. It's actually the site, too, where Dr. Weissman, the doctor who designed the technology that was in both Pfizer's and Moderna's vaccine, works. And so this is the site where everything's happening, Allison. So basically, these volunteers signed up, they're at will, and they told me that they wanted to help. They felt helpless before, and this is something where they wanted to tackle the spread of COVID-19. So they signed up. They took the first shot back in August through October. They were at varying rates. And then after 28 days, they got the second shot. And then they were able to report their symptoms. A lot of patients reporting, minor symptoms when it comes to headaches, some fever, pain at the injection site, but nothing major. And all of them emphasizing that obviously these symptoms are a lot better than actually getting COVID itself. And actually one of them, Una Brewer, who you're going to hear from in a little bit, she was able to ask Moderna to unblind her because she's a doctor and was offered the opportunity to get the Pfizer vaccine today. And it turns out that she was one of those placebos, because in these studies, there's people that get the vaccine and then those that don't. And it's kind of like a sugar pill, right? And so she didn't get the vaccine and she's able to get the Pfizer one today. And when I asked Dr. Weissman, should we be concerned about that affecting the trial? He said that it's absolutely unreasonable for any patient that did get the placebo to not actually get the vaccine for the sake of the trial, right? Because anybody that didn't get the vaccine needs to get it because there is FDA-approved vaccines out there, and we really want everyone to be safe. So I know there was some buzz about that with the Moderna vaccine going around today, and that's what this doctor clarified for us, Allison.
Great to hear more. We certainly do want everyone to be safe. I know you caught up with some of the trial participants. What did they tell you about it?
Yeah, I mean, these participants were very excited because this is a history-making ordeal, right? I spoke with Mike Pearson and Una Brewer, who I mentioned, but Mike is an African-American man, and he mentioned the fact that here in Philadelphia, despite it being such a diverse city, they were having trouble finding the right amount of African-American participants, and that's a population that was significantly affected by the coronavirus pandemic, and so he wanted to make sure that his input could help instill confidence in the communities of color to make sure that they do get vaccinated, because there is this historic distrust in the Black and brown communities when it comes to medical treatments and medical trials. And then Una Brewer, she's that pediatrician that I mentioned. The scope of her practice during this pandemic has completely changed, and she felt like she couldn't help her patients. And so she wanted to do something to help. And when I asked her, I actually spoke with her in between appointments yesterday virtually, and I asked her, I was like, what does it feel like to hear that the Pfizer vaccine has been approved and now Moderna might as well after you participated in this trial? Take a listen to what she said.
I tell you, myself and my entire office, when we found out, there was a palpable weight that was lifted. It felt like a kid on Christmas morning that we were actually going to, I'll probably get emotional, that we're actually going to, the start of good health. So everybody in my office is just feeling this sigh of relief.
So there's a lot of emotion surrounding this, obviously, Allison, but the two main takeaways I got from speaking with these trial participants, First, we have a lot of information. They wanted to combat this misinformation that's going around, conspiracy theories, and we also have time to do the research. So anybody that's nervous about the coronavirus vaccine, these participants feel very confident that the doctors and researchers did their side of the work to make this possible, and now it's our turn to make sure that we do as well by taking the vaccine to curb the spread. The other thing that Una mentioned, she wanted to make sure that anybody that's maybe skeptical or anti-vaxxers out there, she really wants to spread the word against that misinformation, because this is something that is going to be able to help curb this spread, unlike anything else that we have, Allison.
Maura, you really are the bearer of good news today. Lots of positivity in this report. Would you just remind our viewers for a moment, if you could, Moderna, of course, the second vaccine behind Pfizer, and they are a little bit different, even though they have a whole lot of similarities. What are some of the biggest differences that people should just be aware of?
Yeah, for sure. So Moderna and Pfizer have pretty similar efficacy rates within 1 percentage point of each other. So that's also positive news. But it is important to realize Pfizer is also 2 shots. So is Moderna. Pfizer's are going to be about 3 weeks apart. Moderna is 4 weeks apart. And the other thing with Moderna is that it doesn't need to be stored at these incredibly cold temperatures that Pfizer does. Remember those Arctic sub-zero temperatures that require special refrigerators? Moderna doesn't need that. So that's actually more good news for those rural, smaller populations. Pennsylvania, where I'm at, is very rural for the most part. The bulk of the country is. And so this is going to be a huge plus in terms of distribution for this vaccine. But Allison, I know we're talking about a lot of good news. There's a lot of hope and light at the end of the tunnel. But this does come as we're still seeing these record spikes in cases, deaths, and hospitalizations across the country. Here in Pennsylvania specifically, they're seeing double the amount of hospitalizations that we saw in the peak during the spring. So there is this balance. You know, we can have this hope, but we do need to recognize that, you know, it's going to still be several months until the curve starts to go down again with the effects of these vaccines.
Yeah, and Maura, your tunnel reference is so appropriate because anyone who's ever driven from eastern Pennsylvania across the state to western Pennsylvania knows you drive through a whole lot of tunnels, so people maybe should think about it that way. It's the light at the end of the tunnel, but you got a couple more tunnels to go before you get from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh.
Exactly. For sure.
Thanks, Maura.
Thanks, Allison.
Connecticut rolling out coronavirus vaccines for nursing homes and assisted living centers today. 95-year-old Jean Peters was the first nursing home resident in that state to get the vaccine. She says she got her hair done and wore a sweater to match her face mask just for the occasion. NBC News reporter Vaughn Hilliard is in the Nutmeg State with more on the vaccine rollout.
Allison, this is a major day here. Connecticut, along with states of Florida, Ohio, West Virginia, these are the first states that are delivering COVID vaccines inside of long-term care facilities. Other states around the country are expected to roll out their vaccines to these types of facilities and residents over the course of the next 2 weeks. But here, on this Friday, this morning, 95-year-old Jean Peters, well, she was the very first one of those long-term care facility residents here in the state to get that vaccine. Take a listen.
I feel fine. I feel good. The shot was no problem, and I think everyone that can and should get a shot of the virus, definitely, no matter what age. I'm 95, but I'm still counting.
Not only is it crucial for people like Jean to get this vaccine here, particularly to save lives, at the same time, it's also about the urgency to alleviate some of these pressures on some of these hospital systems. You know, we should note that 60% of the deaths so far from COVID here in Connecticut are within these long-term care facilities. Nationwide, that number is 40%. So the hope is over the course of the next month and a half that the inoculation of this older population will help alleviate some of that pressure. But the second part of this is that the way in which CVS and Walgreens specifically have joined into this partnership with the CDC to deliver these vaccines here at these long-term care facilities. CVS is partnered up with 40,000 facilities, and Walgreens is partnered up with 35,000. And those pharmacists are coming here, delivering those vaccines, administering them in person, and then following up 3 weeks later. The big question marks are, of course, the effort within these facilities to get people to commit to getting these vaccines. And in the case of some folks who are not necessarily wholly cognitive to make that decision themselves, to be in touch with their loved ones who are able to help make that decision and try to create spaces and environments here in which not only the community of residents, but also those staff here, from the nurses down to the maintenance workers, are able to safely come in and exist in these types of spaces. Allison?
Moderna's vaccine could roll out to frontline healthcare workers next week. This week, thousands of doctors and nurses got their first dose of Pfizer's vaccine, including our next guest, infectious disease physician, Dr. Maddie Schladishweyo-Davis, fresh off her shot just a few hours ago. Loving the photos, Dr. Davis. Thank you so much for sharing them. So tell us about it. You look great. How you doing?
Thank you so much, Allison. I mean, what a day. It's so hard to put into words everything that this opportunity means to me. As you know, it's been so important to me to advocate and spread information that's accurate and timely and important for our communities during this time. And for something that literally took no more than 5 seconds, it meant so much. It meant so much to the lives. I thought about the lives that we've lost, unfortunately, and weren't able to save. I thought about people in my community, in Black and Brown communities, who've been disproportionately affected and have suffered at the hands of this. I thought about my family. I thought about my husband, who won't be able to get this for months, and my 2 little girls. It was a beautiful moment, and I'm incredibly grateful.
It's amazing because so many people are describing it as it's just like getting the flu shot. It's not even as bad as getting the flu shot, but you don't sit down and get the flu shot and feel that kind of emotion, feel that kind of weight. Just listening to you describe it, I would have been in tears. I imagine you were probably on the brink as well.
I was. And it's so funny, when I got the notification that I would be able to get it today, I was walking to the clinic and I was simultaneously so excited. I was like a child. I was like a kid in a candy store and nervous at the same time. And this comes for someone who, I have all this information and I work in the medical field, but yet there was still that little bit of nerves, you know? What I want to tell people, and that I'll be very transparent with, is that I have a fear of shots. I'm the weirdest doctor you'll ever come across. Like, I'm such a baby about getting labs, getting shots. Every year with the flu shot is a debacle. And the nurses always make fun of me, as they should. This was the least painful shot I've ever gotten. And they watch you for 15 minutes afterwards to make sure there's no reactions. After the flu shot, I usually feel some pain and tenderness in my arm. Not this time for me, and I'm certainly being open to the fact and thankful I got it on Friday so I can see how I feel tomorrow, but have not felt any sort of negative reactions. And that's not to say that isn't the case for other people, but I think because of what this has been for us for 9 months, we think of this as some sort of overwhelming, different experience. And what I want to reassure the public is, much like you get your other shots that you have to stay up to date with, the actual experience is not as scary as you may think it is. There's a lot of questions and dialogue we need to have around the data, and we should continue to. People deserve to. But I just want to reassure people that coming from someone who's a big baby about these things, it was such a great experience.
That is so reassuring to hear. And Dr. Davis, we will never make fun of you here at News Now. I know we have never met in person, but you have become like family to us. And I'm so glad to hear that it went so well. And I'm getting emotional just hearing that you got it, thankful that you got it, that someone that we know and love in our News Now family is now a little bit better protected. So that is just wonderful to hear. I know that this is just the first step in the process. You have to go back for that second shot. Are you already scheduled for that? Is that already set up? Do they do that right away, or do you have to wait?
Yes, I want to thank all of the folks working at the VA tirelessly right now to take care of vets, as they always do. I want to encourage health workers still waiting for their shot. everyone will get this, and it's hard waiting and seeing all the pictures on Instagram and Twitter of colleagues, but we are in this together as we have been throughout this. And I just hope that, as people's days come, they'll feel that. What it was like for me, and the reason I thank them, is it was such a smooth process. The check-in was very smooth and took no amount of time. The shot itself was smooth. And then they give you a card, at least at where I work, that lets you know this is the date and time you need to come back. For me, because of Pfizer, it's 3 weeks from now exactly. So my time was 1 o'clock today. It'll be 1 o'clock on January 8th. For the second dose. And we know that's important because we won't get to those high numbers of efficacy, 95%, without coming back during that time. For Moderna, folks will get their first shot, and then it'll be 4 weeks after that. So that's really the process, and very simple.
You got the Pfizer shot, which is approved for people 16 and up. Moderna's vaccine is recommended for people 18 and older. I know it's just a subtle difference, but do we know why there's a difference of a couple of years there?
It's interesting when you look at the conversations which they've made public now of this conversation that, again, we have many checks and balances. One of those is an external advisory board that convenes to give the FDA, and I beg your pardon, the CDC, their feedback about how they feel this data looks and what should or should not be considered. This very topic came up. Is should we open this to younger age groups? And what people need to understand is the biologic difference between a 16, 17, or 18-year-old is basically negligible. There's no overwhelming difference in how the body will respond to medicines and vaccines based on our many, many years of experience. What they took into account was that we've got to consider that a lot of these younger folks, 16, 17, and 18, are essential workers who are on the front lines, many of them disproportionately from Black and Brown communities who are also seeing this at much higher rates. And so there was a concern here about needing to protect them. So I don't think we need to overthink that 2-year difference. Really, most of the conversation was talking about how, from a biologic standpoint, it's very negligible in response and differences.
Let's talk about side effects for a moment. I understand that Bell's palsy is one of the rare side effects with Moderna's vaccine. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? Because that could be a frightening thing for some people.
People hear these side effects and get very afraid, and the Bell's palsy data was very, very minimal, and again, not something that you see commonly. One of the things that we've made clear with this vaccine is that the only real contraindication is to people who have had an anaphylactic or very serious allergic response in the past and should not. But there is no great concern that Bell's palsy is something that would routinely happen and certainly did not happen in any significant numbers. And again, it's very hard to tell when something like Bell's palsy happens if it truly can be linked to the vaccine alone. And so for those of us in the scientific community, this has not shot up high alarm system signals at all.
That's great to hear. Dr. Davis, there is so much to be excited about as our country starts to get vaccinated, so much to be thankful for, but we know we still have a long way to go. What is your message for Americans with Christmas a week away, New Year's a week after that? What are the most important things that we can do over the holidays to protect ourselves, our families, care for our neighbors, care for people we may never have met, but just to be more responsible to one another?
My message is this: you have a right to be frustrated. You have a right to be tired. We should not be in this position in December that is as bad, if not worse, in most areas in the U.S. than where we were in March and April. We've surpassed some of those numbers, and that shouldn't be the case. But at the end of the day, forget the politics, forget all these other things. In thinking about your communities, your families, the people that you love, the best thing that you can do to protect them is to continue down this road. The vaccine is one very important tool in a much wider toolbox. We need the vaccine, but we continue to need masking. We continue to need you to please not engage in large gatherings. Christmas must look different this year, and it won't next year, most likely. And I think that's a sacrifice worth taking. You still need to be washing your hands, and you still need to be engaging in social distancing with that 6 feet apart. This has to happen if we're going to save the people that we love. This is no longer just something that affects old people, certain people's ethnic and racial backgrounds. We're seeing this in young people, old people. It does not discriminate. So let us band together and do what it takes to get through this, as tough as that may be.
Let's do it. We still have the opportunity to make, to try to make this better, to try to help one another. Let's take it. Let's save lives. Dr. Davis, we are so happy. I just can't tell you how wonderful it makes me feel to know that you're halfway through this vaccination process, that someone we care about is protected. And we are so proud of you at News Now. Several of our producers, not so good with needles either, and they're very impressed. We know you were very brave today.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
See you soon. After healthcare workers, who's next in line for the COVID vaccine? The CDC is meeting this weekend to decide just that. NBC News senior medical correspondent Dr. John Torres walks us through the possible timeline.
It's the beginning of the end of the coronavirus pandemic.
Make no mistake about it. It's a medical miracle.
A vaccine is here. In the next few weeks and months, a few more could be ready as well. Which brings up the big question, when will it be your turn to get it? Public health officials are still figuring out the details, but we do have an idea about how this will play out. Top health officials say everyone who wants a vaccine will be able to get one by late spring or early summer.
By the time we get to several months into this year, we will have enough people protected that we can start thinking seriously about the return to normality.
So that means you can't just go to your doctor or pharmacy and get one right away. This process is going to follow a pretty specific order laid out by the CDC and local governments. First up, in Phase 1A, the 21 million healthcare workers. That, of course, means doctors and nurses, but also the other people who make sure our healthcare system stays up and running, like cleaning staff, cafeteria workers, and nursing home aides. And speaking of nursing homes, the first phase will also include the 3 million residents of nursing homes and long-term care facilities. Some of those 24 million people are getting vaccinated right now, and Operation Warp Speed officials have said they can distribute 40 million doses by the end of the year. But remember, both the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines require 2 doses, so this will cover about 20 million people, meaning Phase 1A will definitely continue into January. Who's up next will be decided by state governments and the CDC, but Phase 1B will most likely be essential workers. About 87 million Americans work in industries that are vital to keeping the country afloat. These workers are more at risk for COVID-19 because they can't work from home. Essential workers are also disproportionately from Black and Latino communities that have been hit especially hard by the coronavirus. And who is considered essential also depends on where you live. So a lot of this will be up to state governments. For example, states like California and Arizona might decide to prioritize farm workers. Somewhere like Idaho might consider food processing workers, while in Kentucky, grade school teachers could be prioritized. Phase 1C will likely be high-risk adults. 100 million adults have underlying health conditions that put them at a higher risk of getting seriously ill with COVID-19. Think diabetes, cancer, obesity, or kidney disease. Another at-risk group, adults over the age of 65. That's about 53 million people. After these groups are vaccinated, 264 million people, that's when shots will be available to healthy adults. As for kids, Moderna and Pfizer are testing their vaccines on children as young as 12 right now, so we don't know where they'll fall on the timeline just yet. How you'll get the vaccine once it's your turn is still being worked out too. But most likely it will be like getting your flu shot through your doctor's office or at a pharmacy like Walgreens or CVS. Of course, these vaccines could not be coming at a better time. Experts say we're in for a really tough winter. If this timeline holds, everyone who wants a vaccine could have one by May or June, which means a hopeful spring is right around the corner.
With exactly 1 week until Christmas, millions of Americans are ignoring the warnings from health experts and getting ready to travel, many of them relying on COVID tests to give them peace of mind. But those tests are not so easy to get. NBC News investigative and consumer correspondent Vicki Wynn shows us the long lines and the high costs.
Long lines and waits that can take hours.
I waited in line for about an hour and 20 minutes.
As millions of Americans flock to get COVID-19 tests, now a new surge in testing demand with Christmas just days away. Despite warnings not to travel,
people are going to do it regardless. And so if you do, let's be as safe as we can.
Dr. Rahul Kara, an emergency room doctor, owns urgent care clinics and testing centers in the Chicago area. He says getting a COVID test before seeing loved ones doesn't guarantee safety, but it can lessen your risk of spreading the virus.
People think if I get a negative test, it's a free pass. I can go, I can hang out, I don't have to wear a mask, I don't have to socially distance. What do you say to that?
Having a negative test, any negative test, is not a free pass. It just tells you that at that moment, they did not find any virus in your nasopharynx or your nasal cavity. But it's important to know that as long as you are negative, please wear your mask, please socially distance.
Currently headed out to go get a COVID test, so let's see how long the lines are, how long the wait will be.
NBC News producers all over the country, from California to Florida, headed out to see what it's like to get a test.
Today, it is a very long line.
In New Jersey, so far, it's easy at this urgent care clinic.
No wait, no appointment, just come on in.
In Southwest Florida, the lines are a bit longer at this state-run testing site.
Usually there's a line of cars all the way onto the street. Not today, but there's still about a half-hour wait.
But across the country, at another public health testing site in Los Angeles,
This is the line to get into the COVID test site. It's all the way under the freeway.
and in Dallas at this urgent care clinic, be prepared to wait a while.
It's a minimum of 3 hours right now.
Despite long wait times in almost every region we checked, results were available within minutes, but they came with a hefty price tag. These private testing centers often charge hundreds of dollars. At this testing center in Florida,
really no wait, 3 to 4 hours to get your results, but it costs $125 out of pocket.
Our same producer found even pricier tests in New York City.
Today, I had an appointment. It took just 8 minutes. But you have to be willing to shell out some money. This appointment cost $250.
Healthcare experts say if you have insurance, all COVID tests, rapid or PCR, are covered, and there should never be any out-of-pocket costs. But if you go to a lab or clinic that's out of network, like the ones where we got quick results, or if you don't have insurance, you could pay hundreds of dollars for one test. An insurance industry trade group found that 1 in 6 out-of-network COVID tests cost in excess of $400.
And that's why it's so important to check with your health insurance provider, make sure where you're getting tested is part of your insurance network.
To avoid getting a surprise bill before getting the test, check with your insurance to verify the doctor, lab, or clinic are in network. If you don't have insurance, look for a public health testing site. The lines may be longer, but the tests are always free. While experts say staying home is safest, if you choose to travel, try to quarantine as long as you can before the visit and for at least 5 days once you return, and consider getting another test. Tips to reduce your COVID risk while trying to get home for the holidays. Vicki Nguyen, NBC News.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.